Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about what happened last week, and in particular about Jeremy Hunt's, whatever it's called, his budget, and how it confirmed really that we are, as an economy, in very, very serious decline, and that decline is not going to end for some time yet. Does seem odd, I must say, that only a few weeks ago, Kwasi Kwarteng was giving away 50 billion in tax cuts, and now Jeremy Hunt is taking 40 billion in additional taxes. It also seems odd, really, why you would be taking so much money out of the economy when people are so hard up anyway. Why you would be increasing taxes when people are struggling so much, but I presume that's to keep the markets happy. Now, if you look around at the way our economy is performing, you look at any surveys, we've all seen, I'm sure, the chart that's been all over the place this last week, showing that of the G7, we're the only one that has not recovered to pre-19 COVID levels, and how compared with other economies we're doing so much worse, and we all know how we're forecast to be the 19th out of 20 countries in terms of performance, the G20 countries. Next year, the only one doing worse, of course, is heavily sanctioned Russia. We also know that we're the only country in the G7 already in recession, and we're the only one as yet forecast for our economy to decline by another 7% in the next 2 years. So we are really in desperate trouble. We are doing much worse than everybody else, despite the fact that whenever any politician is asked about it, they'll always say, oh, it's worse, this is just as bad in Germany, just as bad here, there and everywhere. I'm sure it's worse in Zimbabwe, but they'll always find something else. And all these problems that we've got, where we're doing so much worse than everybody else, it's all because of COVID, which affected everybody else. It's all to do with Putin's war in Ukraine, which affected everybody else, affected some others much worse than us. It's all to do with the last Labour government. It's all to do with everything except Brexit. It's nothing what to do with Brexit. That's why nobody ever mentions Brexit. The word Brexit is a bit like the word Macbeth in the theatre. You can't utter it. Don't mention Brexit. I'm reminded of that scene in Fawlty Towers where the Germans are staying, and Basil Fawlty is getting all excited and embarrassing himself, and he dashes out of the dining room, having upset them, and he goes into the foyer of the hotel, and he says, "Don't mention the war." He said, "I mentioned it, but I think I got away with it," and that's now the government, isn't it? And no mention. You can't mention Brexit. The same with the Labour Party. Nobody can mention Brexit. It's done. It's done deal. We got it done. And it is just doing huge damage to our economy. Our exports to the EU are £100 billion down. So that's approximately 40 billion in taxes that we've lost. I mean, that's about what Jeremy Hunt was raising last week. And I thought, it's quite useful sometimes with these sort of analogies to try and sort of paint a picture of how the situation is really. And I'd ask you just to imagine this. Think of a family. There's a husband, wife, and they've got 2 small children, 5 and 7 years old perhaps. Perfectly normal family. He's got a job. He's a bookkeeper in a local company. And they've got a car and they've got a house. They're renting the house. And they've got just about enough to manage on, except that from time to time they've had to borrow money. So they've got an overdraft and he's got some credit card debts and so on. So he's they're just making ends meet, but they're okay and they're quite happy and everything's fine. And one day he goes down to the pub and he comes back from the pub and he says to his wife, he said, "I met this guy called Nigel in the pub. Oh. He said to me, I'm mad working 5 days a week. He said, what I should do is take 2 days off and go and find other jobs. There are people queuing up to employ me. There would be. And that's what I think I'm going to do. I'll go find much better paying jobs for those 2 days and I'll stay where I am for the 3 days." So the wife says, that's crazy. We're managing now. Things could be better. But we're secure. Everything's fine. We're managed to pay for everything. And he says, well, I know what we'll do. We'll ask the children. So he calls the children, the 5-year-old and the 7-year-old. He says, now listen, I've met this man down the pub, and he says that if I take 2 days off a week and I go off and work for one of these people who are queuing up to employ me, we'll have lots more money. And we'll be able to have ice creams, we'll be able to go to Disneyland, and the children jump up. Oh, yes, wonderful idea. Okay, it's decided then. We've had a vote. The children and I want me to do this, and the wife doesn't want to. So he goes into his work the next week, and he says to the boss, he says, look, I only want to work 3 days a week. The boss says, what are you going to do? And he says, well, I'm going to go off and find better jobs than this one for the 2 days, Thursday and Friday. Boss says, well, I think you're crazy. He says, but yes, I'm fine, that's fine. You can carry on working 3 days a week. But if you do this, if you leave, then the other 2 days I should get somebody else. So you won't be able to work the other 2 days. That will be a gone. So yeah, fine. So in due course, the first free Thursday arrives, and he goes off looking for jobs, and all these people are queuing up to employ him. And nobody wants him. And he does the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and the weeks after week. And every time he goes anywhere, he can see he's desperate. There just aren't any jobs. And so he says to his wife, he says, I have to go see the bank. I have to go and see Mr. Quarteg, the bank manager. So he goes on to Mr. Quarteg. He's already got an overdraft. And he says, Mr. Quarteg, could I borrow £100,000, please? And the bank manager says, what's it for? He says, well, I can't make ends meet. I just need it. We didn't have for living expenses and so on. And the bank manager says, you must be crazy. I'm not going to lend you money. You must be absolutely mad. He says, not only that, I'm going to put the interest rate up on your overdraft, because he says it's less secure now. So he goes home to his wife and he says, he says, I went to the bank manager. No, just put the interest rates up. We're going to pay more interest now. But he says, no, I've got another idea. He says, I'm going to get a high-skill, high-paid job. She says, what do you mean? No, he says, I've heard about there are lots of high-skilled, high-paid jobs coming. Where are you going to work? Where? He says, well, apparently behind the shopping centre, down the shopping centre, behind there they're going to build a Silicon Valley. There are lots of high-skilled, high-paid jobs there, so I'm going to go and work there. So she says to him, when's that going to happen? Don't know. What are you actually going to do? Don't know. But that should solve all our problems. And that's where we are. We've turned our backs on the biggest, richest, most successful trading bloc in the world, lost 100 billion of exports, and that's increasing the losses all the time. It's diminishing all the time because it's almost impossible for small and medium-sized businesses to export to the EU. And we're just floundering around, and we haven't got enough money coming in to make ends meet. And so the whole country is getting more and more into debt, and the government has no idea. And there are two things I want to say, really important things about business, because both the Conservatives and the Labour Party talk about growth all the time. Growth. It must grow. I can say to you, I'm going to be wealth. I'm going to be really wealthy. How? I don't know, really. We're going to win the lottery, perhaps. And so they keep talking about growth. Well, growth only comes from business. Money is generated by business activity. The absolute number one priority for any government, with regard to business, is to make it as easy as possible. You must make it easy to start a business, easy to raise money, easy to find premises, easy to find employees, and above all, easy to export. Just make business easy. And what this government has done, and what we have done with Brexit, is to make business very, very difficult. And in the case of thousands and thousands of companies, make it almost impossible. And the reason, as I've explained many times before, is that if you're a small company, you want to export small quantities to the EU, people in the EU take one look at it and they say, we don't want the paperwork. We're not bothered to buy 200, 500, 1,000 euros worth of stuff. We don't want all this paperwork, all this bureaucracy. We're just not bothered. We can buy somewhere else. And that is the reason why our exports are down 100 billion. The other thing about business is, because, during his speech, Jeremy Hunt talked about he mentioned high skill, growth, and high wage, high skill, and he mentioned also about Silicon Valley. And when you drop in Silicon Valley, it's just so absurd. It's just so absurd. It's wrong on so many levels. And the idea that we're going to create at this stage a new Silicon Valley in Basingstoke or somewhere, I mean, it's just utter nonsense, pie in the sky rubbish. But the thing you do need to remember about business is that every single business, all these big businesses, Apple and Microsoft and Google and Alibaba and Samsung, all these businesses, everyone, none of them started with 100,000 employees. They all started with 1 or 2 people because they had an opportunity. And they had the opportunity to build their businesses quite quickly. But where you're in an economy which is in steep decline, where you cannot export, you are so handicapped that it is very, very difficult to start and succeed in business right now. And on top of that, of course, we've been told now that the economy is going to shrink by, 7% in the next 2 years, 4% next year and 3% the year after, or that we're going to have, I think the standard of living is going to diminish by 7%. So that means people are going to have 4% less money to spend next year and 3% less the year after. So this means that people are going to have that much less money, and that is money that is going to be discretionary spending. You know, you're not going to say, I'm 7% worse off this year, I'll pay 7% less rent, or I'll pay 7% less on the electricity. You haven't got an option there. But you have got an option about whether you go to the restaurant, or you go to the cinema, or you go to the pub, or you go to the gym. And 7% is a huge proportion of our disposable income. And so thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses are going to go under. And not only that, every time a business goes under, it takes other businesses, or it affects other businesses, because all businesses are supplied by other businesses. And so it's just a start of a downward spiral where business is going bust, pulling down other businesses one after the other, and it's just a non-stop decline. And when you've got a situation like this where the economy is in such steep decline, it just is not an option to just be in denial. It's not an option to deny the cause of it when the cause is so absolutely obvious. Exports have collapsed. We don't have any labour to do all the jobs that the people from the EU were doing, the hundreds of thousands of people that were doing that we need in the economy, and we don't want them coming here anymore. And sadly, because politicians are not prepared to accept this, not prepared to acknowledge that there is this terminal disease we've inflicted upon ourselves with Brexit. Because of that, it's just going to go on and on and on, getting worse. And we have the Conservative Party, as I said before, I said last week, I think 19 out of 30 members of the government all believed in and campaigned for and voted to remain. In other words, they didn't believe that Brexit was a good idea. They're now seeing all their worries about it and all their reasons for not wanting Brexit coming true. And yet at the same time, they're all pursuing it. They're all keeping on with it because they want to keep their jobs, of course, in the case of the government, and they're worried about the ERG. And then on the other side, you've got the Labour Party. Well, yeah, they want to do Brexit. They don't want to talk about it. I saw John Ashworth on Question Time a couple of days ago. John Ashworth, I think he was formerly the Shadow Secretary of State for Health. I'm not sure what he is now, but the moment Brexit came out, he said, no, it's all finished. It's all finished. It's in the past. Like Keir Starmer. Brexit, we're not talking about. There's no going back. No talking about rejoining the single market and the customs union, and no question of ever having free movement again, or heaven forbid the idea of rejoining the EU ever. Although we're told that's just a trick. You know, he's just trying to trick everybody, but really he wants to go back in. You know, until somebody gets up and says this is madness, this is absolute madness, the boat is sinking. Until somebody actually says that we must reverse, we must do something, we must somehow or other start engaging with the EU and finding a way that we can ease trade again so that we can start getting back some of the trade we've lost. so we can start to arrest this decline. Until somebody's prepared to do that, we will just go down and down and down. And I think we are declining so quickly right now that I'm really quite concerned about what's going to happen after Christmas. I think now, as I said before, we've got the Matang in the jungle, and we've got the World Cup coming up, and then it's Christmas, and Christmas is going to be very difficult for a lot of people. But then January is going to hit us, and there are going to be people. I mean, we're talking about a 7% decline over living standards over 2 years. Well, that's not going to suddenly happen. That's going to happen gradually, and there are going to be people who are not going to be able to feed their children. There are going to be people who are going to die of cold, and there are going to be people who are going to really, really suffer. On top of which, if you look around, you see, it's partly because of all this, the health service is absolute chaos. The police, they're absolutely useless. They're unable to solve any crimes. Everybody is so obsessed with, I think, so obsessed with bureaucracy these days. There's so much bureaucracy, and we're not very productive anyway. We're famous for our poor productivity. And it's just this sort of sense of drift, but drift downwards, that has to be arrested. And at the moment, I don't see any way that's happening. And I think there's every possibility there'll be social unrest before very long. I just don't see, looking at the government we've got now, this tired, shabby, second-rate load of nobodies on the front bench of the government, and you just look at them and you think, they haven't got a clue. They haven't got a clue. All they know is that to keep the ERG happy, they have to continue to pursue a policy which is destroying the economy. Brexit. Anyway, that's what I think about it. I'm sorry it's not very cheery. My videos, as you well know by now, if you've seen any before, that are not somewhere to come for optimism. I just would like to say one other thing before I finish. Yesterday I was very happy to take part in a discussion with Max Robespierre and Alex from Political X. It was a discussion about politics and so on, and particularly Brexit, and it was good fun, and we had a good laugh as well. And that is going to be available as from tomorrow. I'll leave a link down below, but if you're interested, please have a look. And so with that, if you've watched this far, thank you very much, and until next week, bye for now.